This video was brought to you by Squarespace. Ever wondered why modern technology looks so boring? I mean, compare it to the 2000s. With clear consoles, iconic cameras, computers, and phones, things were a lot more exciting, and I can't help but think, what happened to experimental design? Seriously, what business did anyone have making a camera phone watch? Still, the question remains, why did Mac go from this to this? What about Xbox? The answer surprised me, and it turns out it runs a lot deeper than just uninspired tech aesthetics. Before I got there though, I needed to look at some of the strangest trends, gadgets, and contraptions from the 2000s to figure out if things really were better. Naturally, this meant buying and trying some of them myself, which went about as well as you'd expect. Oh my god. When I think of cool tech, the first things I think of are gadgets. Unconventional, over-engineered designs with little to no functional use. But from the 90s all through the 2000s, people were obsessed with them. I've seen people call this the experimental era, a time when companies legitimately tried to make the kind of stuff you'd see in Spy Kids. We'll start with the more logical examples, but gradually get more bizarre as we dive deeper. Remember that episode of The Office when Jim and Pam communicate via the little Bluetooth earpiece? Well, those were actually a pretty huge deal at the time. Popping one in immediately made you look like you were doing some seriously important shit. Being the 2000s though, Bluetooth devices weren't nearly as compact, and you were more likely to be walking around looking like the bald guy from Empire Strikes Back. They did look futuristic though, with many using the same sleek, chrome look as phones and consoles. And at the very least, they were somewhat functional, because this thing wasn't. The Telson TWC is perhaps my favorite product from the experimental tech era. It looks like PlayStation 300 leaked concept art. Ultimately, it was a jack of like 3 trades and a master of none, and it didn't really take off. Moving on, does anyone remember Segways? They were everywhere for a couple years, and then suddenly they just disappeared. I don't know if these really count as gadgets, but they are a great example of cool looking 2000s tech that didn't live up to the hype. To be fair, when you stripped back the goofy product placement and media, the core idea was really sound. Personal electric vehicles are quite popular today. There's those bikes you can rent in the city, for instance, and even those electric scooters. However, the problem with Segways was simple. They were way too expensive, and the average person didn't really need one. Imagine trying to take it to work. Where do you store it? It's too big to be carried around or folded up. Of course, you could always just leave it outside and hope someone steals it, but come on, no one's taking that shit. Now, I can't not talk about gaming here, because the industry was a major offender when it came to strange devices and peripherals. You don't really see this kind of stuff anymore. Most consoles and games only use the bog standard controller and hardware, but not too long ago things were quite different. Still, for every Guitar Hero guitar, Donkey Kong bongos, Wii wheel, and balance board, there was an equally ridiculous failure. The Tony Hawk ride board, the Kinect. The 2000s fascination with motion controls and revolutionizing player-game interaction created way too many of these, and they quickly got old. They also just took up a bunch of space, and there literally wasn't room for any more in the market. Truthfully though, it's easy for me to sit here on my computer and poke fun at gimmicky products from the 2000s. To even the playing field, I decided to actually order and test some. Will they arrive? Will they work? And will they suck? Well, whenever Australia Post gets here, we'll find out. Gadgets aren't everything though, and conventional tech like computers also shared aesthetics that you'd struggle to find today. In fact, some of the very companies praised for slim, minimalist devices now were once pushing the envelope with bold, radical designs in the 2000s. Even stranger, one of them might be the only reason that you can buy an iPhone today. Hear me out. In 1997, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy. The Macintosh was growing outdated, Windows was cheaper and more accessible, and Apple had spread themselves thin, being too slow to adapt and compete. Another key absence was one of its founders, visionary Steve Jobs. Apple had ridden the hype generated by the innovative Macintosh for too long. Whatever the case, they were looking for a lifeline. And it came from perhaps the last place you'd expect. Microsoft invested $150 million to keep Apple above water. It was a generous move, but one motivated by their own strategic and financial goals. The fact remained though, Apple needed to innovate and fast, and there was one man for the Steve job. Steve returns to Apple as an advisor, but is quickly appointed interim CEO. Things begin to change. He cuts off smaller projects like the Newton, places the focus back on computers, and starts to develop one, the iMac G3. This thing broke all the rules. It wasn't a big beige cube, it wasn't modular. Instead, it had a translucent, rounded shell that housed all of its components. Despite this unorthodox appearance, it was an immediate success. With colorways like tangerine, lime, blueberry, ruby, and grape, the iMac G3 felt friendly and fresh. Steve Jobs had successfully sold simplicity again. It stood out in a sea of chunky, intimidating cubes. Importantly, it also gave Apple enough money to reinvest in their next line of products, which shared these very same design principles. The iBook, the Power Mac G3 and G4. Ultimately, this momentum saved the company, funding the development of several products that you know and use today. So, if this device was so revolutionary, why do Apple's computers look the exact opposite today? We'll come back to that. The story of Apple is well known. The philosophy behind these older designs is far from an industry secret. But what if I could give you a real peek behind the curtain? A glimpse into the behind the scenes of one of the most innovative tech companies in the 2000s. Well, thanks to the hard work of researchers at the Aalto University, I can. The Nokia Design Archive is a comprehensive website covering decades of their products, both the ingenious and the insane. Luckily for us, there's an entire category dedicated to Y2K aesthetics. In their words, early Nokia products came from an era where space-age silver, transparent and iridescent materials and amorphous shapes were design staples. Furthermore, we have access to hundreds of visual examples, everything from real-life products to the concepts that never made it onto shelves. Have a look at some of these sketches. This one looks like the Xbox 720. I think this is a phone. You can really get a sense of their ambition. They weren't afraid to, for lack of a better word, waste resources on fantastical and futuristic ideas. I'd argue the most well-known example of this is the Nokia Morph, a concept phone that would use nanotechnology to, well, morph between a bracelet and a tablet. They even put together a video demonstrating its possible functionality. Back to the design archive, a lot of their more outrageous devices made it past the sketching phase and became physical models. The Nokia 8580 was a digital pocket watch originally made for the movie Minority Report. This, surprisingly, ended up becoming a real product, and you can hunt them down occasionally today. The same cannot be said for the visor concept, which was imagined around 2 decades before the Apple Vision. In a presentation, they went over some of its proposed features. It wasn't meant to be a separate display. Instead, it aimed to enhance our viewing environment. While they focused on its practical value in gaming and office work, they also highlighted its potential to assist people with severe hearing and visual impairments. Nokia weren't the only ones with a cool vision though. Gaze upon the beauty that is Microsoft's Xbox prototype, a huge Chrome X with a boomerang-shaped controller. It really captures the brand's spirit in the 2000s. After all, if you're putting out cutting-edge technology, why not make it look like cutting-edge technology? All I'm gonna say is they really missed an opportunity here when making the Series X. Now yes, most of what I'm talking about here was unrealistic, but it was a different era for technology. You don't see companies testing out crazy designs like this anymore. I wonder how much of it is because we've already peaked in terms of functionality. Like maybe there's no room to experiment with phones anymore because after years of optimization and cost cutting, this has emerged as the most logical design. It would explain why Apple hasn't changed anything but the number of cameras for the last 10 years. Still, these differences are so pronounced that there has to be more to the story. And there was. But first, it sounded like I had some mail. Cool, so we did get some items, which is awesome. That's great that they actually showed up. What's in these parcels exactly, we're gonna find out. I also have one for you. A lot of places on the internet look boring, but yours don't have to. Huge thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video and making it possible for anyone to make hugely customizable and incredible websites. I've made a couple in the past and was shocked at how easy Squarespace had made the process. With their cutting edge design and massive library of fonts and templates, I was never without inspiration or direction. And that's not all. If you've ever felt that itch to start an online business, Squarespace could be both the catalyst and the perfect partner. There's intuitive and in-depth analytics to track engagement and help you grow from the ground up. If you're looking to take your sites to the next level, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/extramin to get 10% off your first website or domain. Copy of Pokemon Silver. Look, I'm gonna put this to the side because clearly this is for something later in the video. Alright, next up we have this one, which is a bit chunkier. Now, I genuinely don't know what stuff is in which box, so we're gonna find out as we go. I think I know what's in this one though. Nicely packaged. Has an interesting odor to it, floral, if you know what I mean. It smells floral, kinda got a floral scent to it. Oh my god. The scent is getting stronger the closer I get to the core. So this model specifically, the seller told me it is a limited edition battle damaged Poochie. So it doesn't have its ear, it doesn't have its tail either. This was exclusive to Northern China. You couldn't get it anywhere else. It also includes the bone, which is excellent. This was the go-to toy in the 2000s. Anyone else remember circling stuff at the back of catalogs to decide what you wanted for Christmas and your birthday? Well, if you weren't circling this, you were doing something wrong. Anyway, let's check it out. What I'm most interested to see is if the nubs move as well. Is the tail... I don't know what's going on there. Plug this in. We're operational. Now, the bone... Okay, the bone feature... Shut the fuck up! Okay, the bone feature is what I'm most... Okay, the bone feature is what the bone feature is... Fuck! Shut the fuck! Okay, this thing... I have to whisper because it's detecting everything I say. The first thing we're gonna do is test the bone feature. Let's see if it actually eats it. Okay, so he can feed indefinitely. Oh! He's dancing? Oh shit! Top comment decides the method by which I will destroy this creature. Okay, so overall review. Was this cracked up to be, was this everything I expected when I was a kid? Would I have wanted this? No. The other thing is it doesn't actually appear to have an off button on the case of it. I guess you just slap in the battery and just let it do its thing perpetually until the end of time. I'm actually starting to suspect that this wasn't a limited edition model. I think someone just sat on this thing 300 times in 2005. And this is the outcome. So, guys, I want to hear some horror stories in the comments. How many times have you ordered something off eBay? What's the most fucked up packaging you've ever... What's the worst condition you've ever received something on... Now, of course, this is a Game Boy Color. This specific model was a limited edition promotion or tie-in with Toys R Us. But the real reason I got this was, of course, see-through electronics. I always talk about them in my videos, and I actually wanted to get a probably authentic one from the time period to review and look at. But the main question here is, do I think this see-through trend of technology looked good? Does it work? Specifically with gaming devices. Yeah, it does. You can see right through to the batteries, all the internal components, the speakers right there. It looks futuristic, it looks cool. This is what a console, especially a handheld, should look like. The design itself is exciting and fun to look at. This thing grabs your attention before you even plug in a game, and there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. So in my books, this is a definite win. See-through technology is sick, and I wish they would bring it back. Now this last product is a bit of an oddball. Now we're in too deep, we're in 4 layers deep, and we can see this does look like something out of Spy Kids. Oh, I know you guys are excited for this one. This is the Hasbro Video Now Color. You pop it open, and inside is a little disc. Interesting. Now, for the more observant among you, you might have also noticed, unlike me, that this disc is rather small. In fact, let's pull out one of the other discs that came with this. The Land Before Time, the Time of the Great. What you might notice is this is a traditional DVD, and it is significantly larger. That's right, this product doesn't work with traditionally sized DVDs. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of mini DVDs, but I do have the one that it came with. So let's plug it in and see what mysteries it contains. As you can see, this is nothing more than just a demo video for the product itself. Look, I think the core idea here is fantastic. It's super portable. It appears to have speakers. I'm guessing if there was an actual DVD, it would have some sort of sound function coming out of there. I'm not 100% sure, but I do like this generally speaking. The only issue is it isn't compatible with standard DVDs. I originally got the inspiration to make this video when I came across this reel in my feed. It contrasts a bunch of early 2000s and 90s tech with a cleanly arranged selection of modern products. Straight away you'll notice several key differences, specifically concerning colour, shape and variety. The modern tech looks homogeneous, as if it's been made and designed by one person. Nothing is trying to stand out, and most are dominated by a single component: the screen. You might point to the fact that the first image predominantly features gaming devices, which are usually more expressive, but as we've seen, they've had a similar transformation. So what's going on here? Why is everything boring now? Firstly, I think this issue goes a lot deeper than design. I want you to try think about the last piece of new technology that you were genuinely excited for. Like in the same way you were for when phones got touchscreen for the first time, or the release of 7th gen consoles. I'm willing to bet that it was a fair while ago. AI has been the biggest jump forward in recent years, and it hasn't exactly been exciting for a lot of people. Additionally, it's generally true that the jumps in hardware between devices have slowed down. Look at the leap from the PS1 to the PS2, the iPod to the iPod Touch. These were groundbreaking changes, but when examining these companies today, you see a stagnation in features and functionality. For the most part, brands found what worked and stuck with it. I believe the same things happened with design. Apple, for example, knows that the most important part of a handheld device is the screen, and so, as touchscreen technology advanced, it really just allowed them to eliminate anything that took up screen real estate. The home button, the black bars on the top and bottom. What works here is what's inside the screen. Apple's job is to simply make it as easy as possible for us to get to it. In this framework, design flair and experimental aesthetics become pointless distractions. It's why you'd struggle to find anyone in the industry today crafting up radical designs like Nokia in the 2000s. The idea of futurism plays into this well, which I talk about in more detail here. In a nutshell, the narrative around new technology back then was one of optimism and excitement. People were expecting massive, futuristic leaps forward, and companies tried to meet them halfway by making their products at least look the part. By the mid-2010s though, the novelty had worn off and another movement began to take the reins: minimalism. Houses changed, user interfaces changed, and so did the things they were inside. Professionalism, organization, and productivity became synonymous with clean, minimalist workspaces. The Apples and Microsofts of the world embraced this philosophy, becoming obsessed with the removal of clutter. You know, any kind of fun design quirk that could prevent you from getting stuff done at 100% of the time. The culmination of all of this is what I like to call Sliminalism. Products were no longer judged as much for their new features and innovation, but rather for how many millimeters they could shave off each year. For Macs, this spelled goodbye to disk drives and various ports, and hello to external adapters and terrible keyboards. In 2015, this came to a boiling point with their butterfly keys. If you didn't use these, count yourself lucky. They sucked. My keyboard was always really sticky anyway, but that was for other reasons. Their thin butterfly mechanism made everything worse, and it quickly became one of the company's most catastrophic failures. Anyway, this all aligned with the changing philosophy behind technology. Function over form. No new devices stood out, and that was completely intentional. To give them credit, it does make sense in the context of workstations. There's nothing inherently wrong with streamlining your workflow, and some people do enjoy a more minimalist setup, but the products just don't look as cool. I liked when companies were making goofy stuff. For me, a design is half the fun when it comes to new devices. If Apple, I don't know, made their new iPhone translucent or dropped a special edition like this, I'd get it. Also, just on a practical level, I don't get the obsession with making stuff thinner. I already mentioned the butterfly keys with the Macs, but I feel like there's so many other drawbacks that people rarely mention. It makes devices flimsier, the batteries have to be smaller, and there's less room for fans and cooling. Recently, I heard whispers from the East saying the new iPhone 17 Air is going to be like 6mm thin. Look, I get it, maybe you fit another booster pack in your pocket or something, but I just don't give a fuck. Also, 6mm isn't even that small, it's actually well above average, so chill out. Was technology cooler in the 2000s? Absolutely, but was it better? At face value, of course not. We can do stuff today that we used to only dream of. Everything is more powerful. Video games look incredible. Still, it's not that the tech got worse, it's that the sense of possibility disappeared. Design is important, and this pervasive minimalist aesthetic contributes to the feeling that things have plateaued. The relentless pursuit of optimization, blending in, and thinness has neglected a massive part of what made technology cool to begin with: experimentation. Revolutionary products like the iMac G3 didn't come from playing it safe, but that's all we see anyone doing today. It makes me wonder, what are we missing out on? Is it worth funding wild concepts like Nokia did in the 2000s? Or maybe this is it. Perhaps we've already peaked.